Wednesday, September 3rd, 2025. We apparently have some microphone now. That's good. Thank you. I'm Mayor Todd Kasenberg, and I'll call this meeting to order. I ask the clerk to note our starting time for the minutes of 7 p.m. A warm welcome and greetings are extended to councillor staff and observers who will participate in this meeting regardless of whether they are physically in attendance in the council chamber in Listowel or being connected through web technologies. We begin tonight's meeting with the playing of O Canada. Those in chambers as able are invited to stand. We acknowledge that we are on the traditional land of the Anishinaabe peoples. We wish to recognize the long history of Indigenous peoples in Canada and show our respect to them today. We recognize their stewardship of the land. May we all live with respect on this land and live in peace and friendship. Tonight's meeting is being streamed live on the Municipality of North Perth YouTube channel and will be available there after this meeting as an archived video. To those who are viewing the meeting via the YouTube channel, a warm welcome to you. To those present in the gallery today by attending a public meeting of the Council, you are consenting to your image, voice, and comments being recorded. Anyone who is invited to speak will be recorded, and their voice, image, and comments will form part of the live stream. The chair and/or the clerk have the discretion and authority at any time to direct the termination or interruption of live streaming. Such direction will only be given in exceptional circumstances when deemed relevant. Circumstances may include instances where the content of debate is considered misleading, defamatory, or potentially inappropriate to be published. Attendees are advised that they may be subject to legal action if their actions result in inappropriate and/or unacceptable behavior and/or comments. At this time, I invite your decorum over the course of the coming meeting. I have regrets tonight from Councillor Leanne Andreessen. Let us move to item 5 of our agenda pertaining to pecuniary interest. Members of council have full lives with engagement in the community. Sometimes they may find themselves with a potential financial or pecuniary interest in an item at the council table. Provincial legislation mandates councillors to declare this interest and, in so doing, avoid direct involvement in the consideration of or voting on the item. I invite all councillors with a perceived pecuniary interest, including those who have already so declared in writing, to verbally advise the chair in open session. Documentation is to be submitted, if not already done, pursuant to council procedures. Councillors may declare now or at any point in the meeting, should such interest be recognized. Colleagues, any of you wishing to make a declaration at this time? I'll make a declaration tonight. Sorry I didn't talk to you about this ahead of time, Deputy Mayor, but I think item 15.1 could, which is related to the closed session discussion, could turn into ways that are inappropriate for me to participate in. I won't elaborate further on that, except that it relates to employment matters. All right. Um, Anyone else? Councillor Rothwell.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, members of council, staff, and public. Good evening. I will also declare a potential pecuniary interest on item 15, closed item, and I won't elaborate further for the same reasons similar to the mayor. Thank you.
And I think both Councillor Rothwell and I, it means that we'll also step out on item 17.1, which is the confirmatory item. All right. As chair of the meeting, I'll manage the flow of our proceedings tonight and largely in accord with our agenda and the rules of procedure. Some may be participating remotely by web conference. I'm not sure if that's true tonight, but should they wish to speak, they certainly may draw the attention of the clerk to this and use the conference technology's text chat function to get the clerk's attention. If technical difficulties arise for remote participants, certainly we'll advise, and we have Simon working with us tonight to help with our AV and IT. Let us now focus on the people's business. Part of that focus is achieved when those in chamber silence and put away their phones. Regarding item 6 of our agenda, a resolution for our consideration to approve the agenda as follows. The agenda for tonight's meeting be approved. I call for mover, Councillor Anstett. Thank you. And Councillor Duncan will be our seconder. Anyone with any discussion or debate on this? Seeing none, let's have that vote. And that is carried. Thank you. Let's turn next to item 7 on our agenda, the so-called consent agenda. We have items placed on our agenda because they're believed to be non-contentious, yet they might warrant council's recognition or action. Grouping them tends to expedite our business. However, any councillor wishing to extract an item from the consent agenda for discussion, debate, or individual action may do so. There are 10 items on the consent agenda tonight, including the minutes of our last regular council meeting. Colleagues, anything to extract here or any corrections that you see that should be made to the minutes? I'm not seeing any expression of interest on that one, so I have a motion as follows that consent item 7.1 to 7.10 be received for information in the minutes of the August 11th, 2025 regular council meeting be adopted. Moved by Deputy Mayor Callum, seconded by Councillor Rothwell. Any discussion or debate? Seeing none, let's have that vote. And that is carried. Thank you. All right, let's move to item 8 on our agenda tonight. We seem sort of fortunate, I guess. We don't have any delegations who've so nominated ahead of this meeting. We also don't have any public meetings that warrant a recess from council. So we can move on to item 9, which is reports from departments and department heads. Tonight, of course, first up, because our focus in tonight's meeting is very much on budget preparations for 2026, are items from the Corporate Services Department. It's item 9.1. In item 9.1.1, Council is being presented with the results of the 2023 financial review by our financial auditors, KPMG LLG. First, I'm going to call on our manager of finance, our treasurer, Ashton Romani, to coordinate any presentations, including his own, for this session. Mr. Romani, welcome.
Thank you, Mayor Kasenberg, and good evening, members of council. So subsequent to the approval of the 2022 audited financial statements, staff engaged KPMG LLP to conduct the audits for 2023 and 2024. The majority of these works were completed over Q2 and into Q3 of this year, and it's been a busy year for finance. So as such, before you, you have the drafts 2023 consolidated financial statements and the 2023 trust fund statements for the cemetery. Included within the cover report are some key figures from the municipality's financial statements. Keep note that these figures are presented in accordance with public sector accounting standards and does vary from our budget documentation and quarterly financial statements. But to highlight some of the key figures, these include overall revenues at $46.4 million, overall expenditures at 35.5, with an annual surplus of 10.8 million. However, keep note in your capital acquisitions were 19.2 million. Reserves are down to $26.8 million from $32 million in the prior year, again, due to those capital acquisitions. So subsequent to the approval of these statements, we're hoping that 2024 will follow shortly thereafter, as the majority of these works have also been completed. We'll also work with KPMG to have the municipality's financial information return filed with the province accordingly as well. So tonight we do have the engagement partner, Brendan Hall, and Ashley Miller, Senior Audit Manager, in attendance for a presentation on their audit findings. So at this point, I'd like to turn it over to them.
Thank you very much, Ashton. So I'll do some introductions first, and then what we'll plan to do is we'll walk through our audit findings report for the 2023 consolidated financial statements. So my name is Brendan Hall. I'm an engagement partner with KPMG. I spend about half of my year working with municipal audit clients, and the other half of my year working with private businesses. So municipal accounting and auditing is something that I spend a lot of time on. With me tonight is Ashley Miller, senior manager in our assurance practice as well, and she's going to be walking us through some of the areas of our audit focus and some of the testing results that our team worked through. I was told I got to point over here, so I got to behave myself. So as Ashton indicated, we are what I would call 95, 98% done our audit on the 2023 financial statements. There are a few administrative elements that our team will still need to work through over the next couple of days. One of them is, of course, attending this meeting and obtaining evidence of the draft financial statements being approved. There's also what's required in terms of communicating with the municipality's legal firms. So there's a procedure called legal letters that are sent to the lawyers, and we have to get all those legal letters back before we can be in a position to issue the financial statement. So over the next couple of days, we anticipate receiving that legal correspondence and being in a position to issue a clean audit opinion on the 2023 financial statements. There was one investment confirm that at the time of drafting this report was still outstanding, but we've successfully obtained that from that financial institution. So there are a couple items on this list that we've been successful in the past couple days in knocking off. Every audit in Canada, I'm going to skip to this slide here because the first slide is more just definition. Every audit in Canada is conducted with the concept of materiality. Materiality guides the performance of the audit procedures. It guides what engagement teams need to look at and the types of testing and procedures that have to be conducted in order for us to gather enough evidence to issue our audit opinion. So for a municipal organization, we typically look at the scope and size of your revenues. You're not a for-profit focused entity. If you're on the listed entity on the TSX, that would be based on income. It would be a percentage of your income. For a non-profit oriented operation, it's based on typically revenues or expenses. It's typically based in a range of 1% to 3% of revenues. And so you can see that we were around the 2% mark for setting materiality. And that figure for the 2023 year was $800,000. That does not mean that we are okay with $800,000 differences. It guides the captions within the financial statements that we need to gather our evidence on to make sure that they are materially free from errors in terms of the final statements that get issued. Any difference that our engagement team identified in excess of $40,000, which is referred to as our audit difference posting threshold, is included in our report that's been made available for this group. We also conduct our audit when we look at the entities that make up the financial statements. So as Ashton indicated, these are the consolidated financial statements of North Perth. That includes the cemetery board, it includes the library, it includes the BIA. When you look at those, what I will call subsidiary entities, they're quite nominal, they're quite trivial in comparison to the grand total of the municipality of North Perth. Our audit team focused solely on what we would refer to as the main entity. So where the bulk of the assets, the bulk of revenues and expenses are recorded. Every audit in Canada, doesn't matter if you're listed on the exchange, you're a mom and pop small business on Main Street, or you're a municipality, there's two presumed risks that engagement teams need to address in the performance of audit procedures. And the first one is with respect to management override. Management of any entity is in a unique position that they could override certain internal controls to accomplish something that they want to accomplish in the financial statements. The way that audit firms address that risk is, in addition to performing substantive test procedures on the balances that are reported in the financial statements, we perform some procedures on the GL activity using risk parameters. So we actually have digital tools. It's a little different than it was done 10 years ago, but digital tools that load every transaction that has been recorded for the entire year into computer-aided software, and it goes through and it looks at patterns that wouldn't be common. So that could be transactions that don't have a typical pattern. So revenue in AR would be a normal pattern. Recording revenue at the same time as recording a payable, that would not be a normal pattern. And it identifies any entries that could be unique or inappropriate in nature and requires the engagement team to do follow-up test procedures on those journal entries that are identified. We did not identify any instances of management override in the performance of our audit procedures. The second risk that we have to consider is fraudulent revenue recognition. Again, every audit that we do, we have to consider if this is a risk that's relevant to the entity which we're auditing. For revenue in a municipality, we don't believe that there's an inherent risk to increase or overstate revenue, like there may be in a private company or an entity listed on the stock exchange. So we, like many of our other municipal audit clients, are able to rebut this risk. So we still perform work on revenue, but we do not perform work with the assumption that there's override with respect to revenue within the financial statements, which is very common in municipal auditing. I'm now going to pass it over to Ashley to chat about a few of our core focus areas, really based on the magnitude and size of some of those captions within your financial statements.
Great, thanks, Brendan. So the first area that we're going to talk about, the first kind of risk area in the audit is cash and long-term liabilities. We specifically focus on this just due to the high dollar value of it. So cash in 2023 is sitting at about 20 million and long-term liabilities about 22 million. So quite substantial considering our materiality level. What we do with cash and long-term liabilities is we send confirmations directly to the third-party financial institutions and also receive them back directly from them. So we're communicating directly with those institutions to receive confirmation of the balance of the accounts. We also tested significant reconciling items within cash if there's any thing on the bank reconciliation that would influence the amount recorded in the GL versus the confirmation, as well as perform substantial analytical procedures on interest expense to just ensure it's reasonably recorded. And so within those procedures, we didn't note any issues or any errors. The next area that we're going to talk about, there was another risk in our file was investments. Again, similar to cash, just due to the high dollar value. It's at about 19 million in the financial statements. And so with investments, similar to cash, we also send confirmations directly to the financial institutions to confirm the balance outstanding. It is important to note that this year, or in 2023, I guess, there was a new financial instrument accounting standard that was introduced. Northcrest holds principal protected notes as their investments. And so with those notes, there is an equity component to them. So due to the new accounting standard, we were required to record these investments at fair value on the financial statements. So you will notice a difference between the 2022 balance of investments and the 2023. And that is just because of the difference in fair value that it has decreased. And so we had to record at the fair value within 2023. Also, because of that standard, you will notice a new statement in the financial statements, the statement of remeasurement gains and losses. That statement is to show the difference, the change in fair value over the year of the investment. So in future years as well, the change in investments will be put into that statement, and it will be adjusted on the statement of financial position as well to record the investments at fair value. Within the bank confirmations, we also obtained the market value of the investments from the bank. And we had our KPMG investment team perform a valuation analysis on those investments just to ensure that amount was accurately recorded as the market value. And the next area I'm going to talk about is the obligatory reserves and deferred revenue. Again, a significant dollar value in the financial statements at about $12 million. Another reason we focus on this account is due to the risk of errors or differences. In a lot of other municipality files, we have found that this is an area where there can be some differences and errors found. You will see in note 11 of the financial statements, there is a breakdown of the deferred revenue balance, and a large portion of this is the development charges. About, I think, half of the balance, or just under half of the balance, is development charges. Within that note, you also see the inflows and outflows of that. We do test both the inflows, the money coming in, as well as the outflows amount of revenue recognized during the year, and we didn't note any differences within those procedures. You'll also notice that development charges also had significantly higher revenue recognized during the year, and that was just due to an additional amount of capital expenditures spent during the year. So, not necessarily higher risk, just the deferred revenue balance did decrease slightly, and that's just because there was more spending in 2023, and that is reflected also within the increase in capital additions during the year. And another item to note is in the 2022 statements, Perth Meadows had a balance in deferred revenue. We have issued a prior period misstatement on that, as we do believe that the deferred revenue balance should be in an obligation account instead of deferred revenue, and I think Brendan will speak on that later when we get to the misstatement slide. But that was included within deferred revenue last year, and we have recorded a misstatement on that. I'll pass it back to Brendan.
Thanks, Ashley. The next area that the audit team focused on was tangible capital assets. Obviously, a municipality has a very large amount of assets, a lot of infrastructure assets, roads, linear assets, equipment and fleet. Capital assets, again, it's an account that there's movement on both sides. So in a given year, there's significant additions. So our engagement team ran statistical sampling on additions that were recorded during the year to ensure that those were supported by third-party invoices and contracts for purchased assets. In addition, ensuring that those items were not indicative of something that's consumed in a short-term period. So for a municipality to capitalize something, there needs to be a multiple-year benefit. So things that are short-term, 1 year in nature, should not be capitalized. Capitalizing means you're not expensing it through the P&L or the income statement in 1 year, but spreading it over the useful life. So there's some procedures that are done to ensure that things that are being capitalized are appropriate. There's also some inverse work that we do where we're looking through repairs and maintenance expense accounts to ensure that there aren't transactions that are recorded within the expenses that are indicative of something that's actually capitalized. So we perform procedures kind of going the other way to ensure the completeness of capital asset additions as well. We did not identify any issues in our sampling and testing procedures performed. Accounts payable and accrued liabilities, again, north of 5 or 6 million from memory on the financial statements. Significant area. An area where the assertion that as an audit team we're really focused on is the completeness. Completeness, that you've captured all the liabilities and obligations that you owe to other third parties. So while we do testing on some of the payable balances, trade payables, invoices that are entered, one of our focus areas is actually on what we refer to as the search for unreported liabilities. So we actually look at transactions that are happening into your next fiscal year to assess if those are indicative of 2023 obligations and should have been recorded. So we're looking at payments happening subsequent to year end. We're also looking at invoices entered into the GL after December 31st, 2023, and we're assessing if those have been appropriately accrued in the financial statements or if there is an understated liability. We did not identify any issues or differences in the performance of our work on the payables. Asset retirement obligations. So Ashton, when he indicated it was a busy year for finance, there were some new accounting standards. New accounting standards that came into effect for your 2023 financial statements that weren't there for 2022. So Ashley spoke to financial instruments. Financial instruments required municipalities to assess if they had investments that had a derivative component, and if they had an investment with a derivative component, you're required to fair value those. Now, the theory there is that on your statement of financial position, or commonly in private entity world called your balance sheet, it's more indicative of the value of that investment at a point in time. The statement of remeasurement gains captures the ups and downs, because these investments do have peaks and valleys as interest rates move and as the various indexes move, for which they have a derivative component, that is kept outside of your statement of operations until the gain is realized. So it's almost like a short-term parking spot for the volatility. So you can see it in your statements. That's the new statement of remeasurement gains or losses. But the actual gain or loss is not reflected in your income statement or statement of operations until you actually transact that investment. So that was new. That's new accounting. That's new standards that we had to work through, and some incremental work that Ashley touched on for investments. Asset retirement obligations was another sizable undertaking for the finance team in 2023. What that accounting standard forced every municipality to think about is, are there certain assets that we have that we have a legal obligation to incur some restoration costs or remediation costs when the useful life of that asset is done. And the two primary areas where this has impacted municipalities is a landfill and if you have a building with asbestos in it. So many municipalities have both of those topics. In previous accounting standards, there was still an obligation to deal with the landfill obligation. The accounting standard was called solid waste and landfill obligation. That went away for 2023, and this new standard, which is a bit more encompassing, captures more than just the landfill obligation, came into effect. And so the asset retirement obligation, what it's doing in your financial statements is dealing with an estimate of that obligation today, such that when you come to deal with that topic, you're not having an income statement impact. We can't predict exactly the dollar that those remediation costs are going to be, but the theory is you've captured that now, and you shouldn't have a significant income statement impact when that remediation or resolution occurs. So that's the concept. You're showing that obligation now. It's present valued, so it reflects kind of that it's not happening today, but it's happening 10, 20, 50 years from now. But you're dealing with that obligation now as opposed to 20 years from now saying it's 20 million to fix X, Y, or Z, and that's a item that flows through the 2055 financial statements. So those were two sizable undertakings that when you're looking at 2023's financial statements and 2022's, there's new accounting standards. Not every year do we have new accounting standards that the regulators introduce. It tends to come in kind of waves every 4 or 5 years. There were some sizable accounting standard changes for the current year. So when we get to the conclusion of our audit, we typically have two schedules that we're discussing with councils and committees. We have our uncorrected differences and we have our corrected differences. The uncorrected misstatements are what I refer to when I'm using casual language as parking spot differences. So things that we would have classified slightly differently on the statement of financial position, but do not impact your surplus, do not impact your statement of operations. But when we walk through the slide, I'll provide a little bit of context where the theory guides us slightly differently than how many would handle things from a practical standpoint. So when we have negative amounts in receivables, so you could have an amount that's prepaid, for example, on taxes, we aren't supposed to, from a theoretical standpoint, record negative assets. Those would be reflected as either a liability or a deferred revenue. These are clearly insignificant when we look at things from a materiality standpoint and from a practicality standpoint. Again, I see this quite often, right? The effort to correct for this would not really add a ton of value, but I have to communicate it because it's above our audit difference posting threshold. For our corrected differences, the only corrected items that we have here, and I want to be very transparent and clear, both of these topics, management was very forthcoming. This was not items that KPMG really identified. It's items that happened subsequent to us receiving the general ledger. We worked with management to assess both the Perth Meadows topic, which I'll elaborate on in a second, and this financial instrument standard, which required different accounting than had been previously done. With respect to the Perth Meadows, what we have here, so Ashley has indicated that we feel the presentation of deferred revenue versus a liability. First of all, those are both liabilities. They end up in the same zone of the financial statements in terms of the balance sheet or the statement of financial position. The reason why we feel an obligation is more appropriate, more accurate accounting treatment is that deferred revenue implies that that amount is gradually going to come into revenue. What this obligation represents is the municipality's required buyback. If I use my casual language again, the 95% that's required to be bought back. And if the municipality had continued with the treatment that had historically been recorded, um, anytime there was a buyback, there was going to be a loss that's recorded in the financial statements. So there was kind of two elements that we didn't feel, and we worked with management to arrive at the same conclusion. Was the obligation was understated, and there was a concept that the current accounting treatment was going to guarantee a loss when those buybacks were actioned. So under the current treatment now, the obligation is reflected on the statement of financial position, which is again casually the balance sheet, now reflects what the municipality will have to give up from a resource standpoint to act on those buybacks. Uh, so again, our state we have to present these as corrected differences. They have been reflected in the financial statements, but I want to be absolutely clear that these were really topics that management was open and brought to the engagement team's attention for assessment and clarification. In terms of control deficiencies, we're required to communicate to this group if we feel there were any significant control deficiencies identified in the audit. We did not identify anything that we would consider to be a significant control deficiency. The audit differences that remain uncorrected do not impact income, do not impact surplus, and our corrected audit differences were matters that management brought to the attention of the KPMG team as we worked through things. We do not issue an opinion on internal controls. As an external audit firm, we have to understand the internal controls of the organization to help us assess the risk in the audit. Our audit is very substantive in nature. And so substantive means we're not testing the effectiveness of controls. We're in a substantive way testing the transactions that have been recorded within the financial statements back to third-party evidence to get a conclusion that we're comfortable with what has been recorded in the general ledger for 2023. So I'm not going to plan to go through our appendices. They're there as reading and links. It's a digital document, so to the extent there's things that are in there that are of interest, you're able to click to various portals. At the back of our presentation, there's a public sector link that kind of gives you some sight into hot topics and some of the accounting standards in the future that will impact things. There are no accounting standards coming forward in the next couple of years. You've got quite a ways before we have any new changes to work through. So at this point in time, I would open it up. If the group has any questions, I'd be happy to respond to those at this point in time.
All right, thank you very much to the entire team. If my colleagues have questions, let's get them on the floor. Anyone with questions or comments at this point? Okay, Councillor Blazek.
Thank you, through Mayor Kisper. Thank you for your presentation, guys. It sounds like a very, very large undertaking, and thank you, Ashton, for the work that you do. You mentioned Perth Meadows and these 95% buybacks, and I'm imagining now that there's going to be some questions from the public that come along with that, and I'm wondering if it would be pertinent to explain perhaps what that means. I'm looking at you, Ashton.
Yeah. Mr. Romani, did you want to try to sort of explain some of the financial things of Perth Meadows?
Yes, I'll try my best. It's quite complex in a number of conversations we've had with KPMG, but ultimately, historically, the accounting treatment of life lease deposits, so residents of the suites pay a life lease amount. Let's say it's $150,000, and when they opt to leave, we pay back $150,000 less 5%. What happened before the accounting treatment to say the collective value of the life lease deposits was $5 million. but we would recognize a portion of that $5 million, let's say $100,000 a year, as revenue, not necessarily the 5%. So at the time, let's say at the end of 2023, if all the residents moved out and we had to pay the life lease deposits, um, and we've been recognizing $100,000 a year leading up to it, there may only be $4 million now in net deferred revenue, where originally our obligation now is $5 million, because that's what we owe to everybody. So what this adjustment does, it reverses the historic recognition of revenue, taking away from those life lease deposits, to say if all the residents move out tomorrow, we would have the funding in that account at that 95% value that we would now be able to reimburse. So that adjustment that was up on the screen um, recognizes us reversing all of that. So ensuring moving forward now we're not taking away from those life lease deposits from an accounting perspective. I hope that made sense.
Thanks.
Yeah, very well said by Ashton. The one piece I would add to that is this current treatment also, protect isn't the right word, but it alleviates recording a loss down the road. So I'm an example person. It helps me to use examples. But if my grandma had a life lease for 100,000 or 150,000, the old treatment was going to result in a loss being recorded when she moved out, because we were recognizing this concept of revenue over a period of time. In reality, it's only the 5% that should ever be recorded, because you have this obligation that the municipality doesn't control when that gets activated. Grandma does. So this should avoid. It was very small on an annual basis. Like, you don't have a lot of these transactions happening, but these losses, to book revenue to then have a loss down the road to reflect that there's revenue earned, it didn't make logical sense. Logical sense can't be a leg to stand on from accounting. The stronger kind of leg to stand on from the accounting standpoint was the obligation you had on your books was understated. It was in a lot of cases marginally lower than what, in my grandma example, could say, hey, I'm exiting the facility. We didn't have that sufficient amount in that liability account, so there'd be a loss recorded.
Anyone else? Councillor Rothwell.
Thanks very much, Mayor Todd, and thank you very much for your presentation. I appreciate that and all your work and efforts, both your team as well as our financial team. So again, this is your presentation for the 2023, but in the report we're talking about 2023, 2024. So if council does its work tonight and agrees, then you just have to finish off a couple of things, and 2023 will be done, and then 2024. So will we be expecting sort of the 2024 piece before, like, I don't want to put a rush on you, but before the end of this year, or what's the expectation?
Yes, absolutely. So we, of course, can't issue a 2024 opinion on financial statements until we get through our work here on the 2023 financial statements. Assuming we get our legal letters from the law firm in the next day or two, my opinion, estimated timeline, ability to predict the world here, we're issuing the 2023 financial statements either late this week or early next week. The audit team has done 90% of the work already on the 2024 figures. We haven't got to the point where we're actually building the financial statements yet. But if I was to estimate when we would be in front of this group again, I would think it's in a month and a half's time. Yeah. So we at the request of management through the summer, basically we're auditing 2 years worth, which is pretty uncommon, right? We're working to get the municipality caught up. And so we were working in parallel. There's a few things we can't do in the 2024 audit in terms of certain documentation and certain procedures until we've closed the 2023. But yeah, it's not like we're 10% of the way. We're 90% of the way done 2024.
Through you, Mayor Todd, thank you very much. I mean, that's frankly staggering to do 2 years in one. And I think we need to recognize that and appreciate the work that your firm's done, as well as our staff. And I appreciate that, and look forward to getting caught up. Again, it was, as I understand, a combination of things that put us in this situation. So thankfully we're going to get back on track, and only have to have one audit done per year. So thank you very much for your work, and thank Ashton and your team. Thank you.
Perfect. And what we would say is our goal here is to basically be working. Again, we're in catch up mode right now, but what kind of the standard timeline is for many municipalities is we're doing that audit work in the March April timeframe subsequent to the year end, and we're coming to this group in the May June July. It varies based on the municipality, but the concept being that you have your consolidated financial statements, 4, 5, 6 months after year end. That's what we're targeting. To do 2 years worth of financial statements, that's impressive. Add on that there are some pretty significant financial statement, accounting standard changes. So this was a big year. We appreciate Adam and Ashton's commitment through this process. I have 30 clients in a given year. I do not always get the amount of commitment and support that we got with this group here. So it was definitely, there's two sides to the coin to get to where we are today. And, I think we'll be back here in a month and a half's time to get 2024 issued and across the finish line.
I can't help thinking that in our 2026 budget, we need to put a line item for capes because we have some superheroes who have been working at our behest, and we might need to issue some. But that sounded like it was just genuinely, we're appreciative that you've caught us up. We know that there were a few years of some turbulence, I guess, when it comes to getting these reports done in a timely fashion. And so now we have a good team on this, and we have a lot of confidence in our own team, and so we're grateful. And if those capes show up, you'll be sent one. I'll make sure of it. Anyone else with thoughts, questions? All right, colleagues, we do have a resolution related to this matter. Mr. Romani, you don't have any parting comments before we consider the resolution? All right, as follows then, that the Council of the Municipality of North Perth receives the 2023 financial statements report for information purposes, and further that the Council of the Municipality of North Perth approves the Municipality of North Perth 2023 consolidated financial statements and the 2023 Cemetery Care and Maintenance Trust Fund financial statements. Can I call for a mover? Councillor Johnston, thank you. Councillor Richardson as our seconder. Any discussion or debate? Seeing none, let's have that vote. And that is carried. Thank you again. We'll see you soon enough. And all right, thank you. Let's turn to item 9.1.2. Council here is presented with a report on the proposed approach, including guiding principles for the preparation of the 2026 budget. The principles will guide staff in their work. I again ask Mr. Romani, our treasurer, for his introduction and overview to these principles. Mr. Romani.
Thank you, Mayor Kiesenberg. So similar to the approach taken last year, this report provides an overview of the budget guiding principles that will be taken into account in the development of the staff proposed budget and the budget pressures that the municipality will face in the 2026 year. With respect to the guiding principles, I will refrain from going into detail about them as they're more or less consistent with last year, and there's detailed descriptions within the report. But at a high level, the guidelines that staff will be taking into account include ensuring alignment with the strategic plan, engaging the community, ensuring we're accountable and transparent. We're preparing the budget in a fiscally responsible manner. The budget will consider environmental sustainability. We'll factor legislative changes and ensure compliance. We will look to be innovative. And lastly, we'll take a risk-based approach when it comes to decision making. Moving on to the pressures we anticipate, the majority are also more or less consistent with last year with some slight changes. Inflation continues to be a constant pressure on the budget on various expense lines. As a guideline, the municipality, along with our peers within Perth County, utilize the county's cost of living figure as an index for salary grids. This year, this rate was calculated at 1.99%. So in the development of the budget, staff will be utilizing this figure to index salaries, but also use this as a measure to index expenses along within our budget and also our fees and charges accordingly. The next pressure is the municipality's infrastructure deficit. As council is aware, with the recent adoption of the asset management plan in June, there was a funding gap identified of roughly $423,000 a year. So staff will be seeking to include this in the operating budget as well to ensure that the $1 billion worth of assets are maintained to their established service levels. Similar to the infrastructure deficit, the municipality continues to have capital pressures within its 10-year capital plan. In order to facilitate some projects, such as the Northeast Master Plan, debt will most likely need to be contemplated in part of the 2026 budget. The following report speaks to debt management policy that will help facilitate that decision-making process on how debt will be utilized. Nonetheless, with a significant capital outlay included within the 2025 10-year capital plan, it will be revised further to better align with the municipality's newly introduced reserve fund bylaw last year and any emerging priorities. Lastly, we also have the OPP contract. As council is aware, there's a significant increase at the end of last year that was later reduced. The contract billing model is currently under review, and at this time, staff don't have any insight on what that dollar figure will actually be. So there are other pressures noted in the report, but they're, again, more or less consistent with last year, being the impacts to service levels, the reduction in assessment growth year over year, and OMPF funding considerations. So that concludes my overview, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Romani. Colleagues, questions, first comments? Councillor Rothwell.
Thanks very much, Mayor Todd, and thanks, Ashton, for the report. Council's discussed with you and others regarding potential changes regarding development charges and what that potentially could mean for our budget. Has there been any more discussion or research that staff is aware of in terms of potential implications of what the province is saying with respect to reduction of amounts which municipalities can charge for development charges?
Yep. Excellent question. It's still a little bit unknown as some regulations haven't come into effect yet. We'll be attending Adam and myself the MFOA conference in a couple of weeks. Hopefully, we'll learn a little bit more. But it's a bit of a status quo on with respect to the financial implications of reduced charges. There is a divided opinion on can it be the reductions that are in play, can they be recovered by future development charges, or is it something that the municipality will have to offset? But we'll continue to explore that.
Councillor Johnston.
Thank you, Ashton, for the report. Assessment. Is MPAC still lagging behind on updating assessments, and are we still at like 1823 on the assessment, or when are they moving forward with updating the assessment?
Yeah, yeah. Through your Mayor Kasenberg, unfortunately, we're still stuck in that cycle. We did have a treasurers meeting in Impact to indicate that we were hoping for an announcement at AMO this year, but maybe we'll hear something at the fall budget update from the province. But we'll keep our eyes open for any announcement.
Anyone else? Can I ask you? I want to see if you can comment just sort of generally. You mentioned the 1.99% cost of living adjustment that the county has used, and that we will certainly apply it to our staff indexing of their wage. But sometimes I think the public thinks that, okay, well, that rate applies to virtually all the rest of what we do. And so why do we see tax increases that are higher than that rate? And I'm wondering if you want to comment maybe on some of the actual, like literally the pressures of some of the contracts, the things that we buy, the things that we use, and that they don't always line up with that in a meaningful way.
That's a great question. So that CPI figure is total CPI for Canada, and in the municipality, we have different levels of service. We deal with infrastructure. There's a non-residential construction index. So some rates that we do pay, we won't see a 2% increase. We might see a 5, 6, 7% increase. So there are other pressures outside of the general index that we do utilize, because there are other indexes for inflation as well. As well, beyond just general inflation, there are other service level needs. We talk about the infrastructure deficit, so the other particular components that are in addition to inflation. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, largely. I mean, certainly we've seen some contracts that, especially in some of the capital areas, that came in below, and I think we were pleasantly surprised. But we also see a lot of contracts that come in much higher than 1.99%.
Yeah.
And so I think there's sort of this sense that, well, why can't you hit the CPI? But like the CPI is this sort of weird target that includes, household costs of like buying food and and so forth. And that's not what the business is that we're in, right? We're in a different business that has, in some ways, probably its own inflation rate, and it's not calculated, it's not published, and so as a consequence, we wind up facing some heat against when we say, oh, okay, our taxes are going to be higher than that number. Just
And if I may add, an example last year that we experienced pressure was the gravel contract increase. If you can all remember that, it was I believe almost a $300,000 increase from 800,000. So it was well over a 20% jump to maintain the same level of gravel that we would lay on our roads on an annual basis. So
right. And it's, I mean, colleagues, I'm sure we all get it. It's plain and simple. Either we reduce the level of service, which most of us don't really want to do because we've scrabbled and fought to get to the level of service that we are currently offering, or we increase the amount that we have to take to achieve the service at the level that right? Thank you. Councillor Johnston.
On the same vein, look at the last year we had the OPP contract come in. Yes, it got bailed out at the last minute, but if we read what's coming up here, people want more police presence, which also brings a cost to it. So you know, you're right. You can't be measured by the CPI. What we do, not at all.
Thank you. Anyone else? Councillor Anstett.
Thank you, Mayor Kaseberg. And that was actually my next question, Ashton. It's on the last page of your report. I know that you've said that we don't have any update. Do we have any sense of that review and where it's at? As Councillor Johnston mentioned, that has serious budget implications if it goes the other way.
We will have a representative of the province from the Inspector of Policing at the next Police Detachment Board meeting, which is next week. And I can assure you now that my interest is piqued, and poor Hank might get a question or two. Anyone else? Any? Okay. All right. We have a resolution as follows: that the Council of the Municipality of North Perth receives the 2026 budget guiding principles and pressures report for information, and further that the municipality of North Perth endorses the 2026 budget guiding principles for the purposes of developing the staff proposed 2026 municipal budget package. Can I call for a mover? Councillor Rothwell, thank you. Seconded by Councillor Anstett, thank you. Any discussion or debate? Seeing none, let's have the vote. And that is carried. All right. Mr. Romani is getting a workout tonight. There should be something on your Fitbit or whatever that tells you how you're doing. For item 9.1.3, Council is presented with the draft of a new debt management policy for its consideration. Mr. Romani is once again up to address this important item. Mr. Romani.
thank you, Mayor Kasenberg. So as mentioned in the previous report, there are several capital pressures on the horizon, and the municipality will likely require the use of debt to fund some of those initiatives. As such, staff have prepared a debt management policy to ensure that debt is utilized effectively. So the policy covers key areas including use for capital purposes only. Debt can only be utilized for tangible capital assets that last at least 10 years, and further that the debt term cannot exceed the asset's expected life. Establishing an internal debt limit, so setting a cap at the municipality's provincially mandated debt limit to 60%. This amount is estimated to be roughly $56 million in additional capacity as of today. Overall, prohibiting the use of the debt of the entire capacity leaves room if there are any emergency situations, and is also just a general best practice, not only for corporations such as ourselves, but also individuals. Budget requirement. This is also another important one. So if debt is approved in a given year for a capital budget, the staff proposed budget must also include the annual servicing cost for that debt. This ensures that the payment obligations are met from a budget perspective, and in some cases, costs may not actually be payable in the year the debt is issued, so we won't pay those annual servicing payments. But it avoids placing the future burden on a future budget or potentially a future council as well at that point in time. So as previously mentioned, with the 60% cap, the municipality's estimated debt capacity is an additional $56 million or $94 million without the cap. This estimate is based on a 25-year amortization cycle at a 5% interest rate. This amount will change year over year, depending on the municipality's net revenues and as well any debt that might be issued. So lastly, one thing I'd also want to remind council about is when debt is utilized, consideration should also be taken into account on how debt is phased, along with other debt that's currently on the books. So from a financial planning perspective, staggering debt maturities rather than clustering them within a narrow window of time ensures the flexibility and capacity for future capital investments. So while the municipality may currently have available debt capacity, it's important to not overextend all of the debt in the near term. So if we're front loading it, the municipality may not have the ability to respond to debt needs later down the line. But overall, debt is a tool and shouldn't be viewed as a negative thing if it's used strategically. So ultimately, this policy will help facilitate the future decision making in the best interest of the municipality.
Thank you, Mr. Romani. That was an excellent explanation. Colleagues, questions, first comments? Councillor Rothwell.
Thanks very much, Mayor Todd. Thanks, Ashton, for your report. Just a question about our rolling stock like vehicles. Now, capital assets are supposed to be 10 or more years to incur debt. Now, when we buy any of our vehicles, if there are incentives for finance and so on, is that an issue for us that we are in fact incurring debt on a vehicle which may or may not necessarily exceed 10 years of life?
Yeah, so through Mayor Kasenberg, debt for utilization of vehicles I would be adverse to using just because, like, some vehicles, yeah, maybe it'll last 15 years, but it may not. It may only last 5, and then we don't want to be held to pay a debt on an asset that's no longer in existence. The only vehicle, if we were to really look at it in a serious circumstance, would probably be an aerial, just because that's a significant amount, and we would expect that asset, and we would hope that asset would last quite a long time. But vehicles in general, I would not recommend for debt utilization.
Just further, if I may, so even if pickup trucks or whatever, if there's 0% financing or 2% or something, we as a municipality wouldn't necessarily go for that. We would pay the amount just in outright, as opposed to taking on debt for those save and accept extraordinary vehicles like an aerial truck and so on. Okay, good, thanks.
Okay. Anyone else with questions, comments? I think because, again, the public may be sort of watching and trying to understand, make sense of the word debt in the context of a municipality. Can you sort of talk a little bit about how we define debt and and sort of differentiate between what the obligations the province places on municipalities are versus their own obligations and federal government obligations for debt, which are seemingly quite different?
Okay, so curious, just to clarify, so our obligation of how we're determined our debt threshold, or
Briefly,
briefly?
and that we're not drowning in debt, I guess is what I'm asking you to sort of reassure people, because
Yes.
certainly, when people hear the word debt, they have an understanding that is more like the province and the feds, and we're not quite the same.
No, no, absolutely not. Yeah, our municipality can't run a deficit budget, as an example, where provincial or federal government can, and they would go into debt. In this particular case, from a municipal standpoint, it's like issuing a mortgage that we're paying for a capital asset or purchasing a house to compare. Um, particularly with there was a point I was going to make, and I forgot it slipped my mind. Sorry.
It's okay. I think the point is made. I think it was important to hear that tonight, that municipal debt looks different
Yes.
than federal or provincial government debt because they incur deficits on their budgets.
Mhm.
We cannot. Municipalities do not do that, right? And so as a consequence, when we use debt, it's strategic for the purposes of capital. And that's what
Right.
this policy is, of course, reinforcing.
Yeah.
And we want people to really understand that point.
And I was going to add the thought that slipped away is that can't be viewed negatively. It's also an opportunity to engage us to acquire capital assets that we would not have been able to acquire with our own cash flow. So it really unlocks capacity. So that's where it can't be viewed negatively. Yes, it's a big scary number. That's can be used as a bad word, but it's the opportunity it also creates for the municipality in the near term.
Right. Thank you. Anyone else with the Councillor Johnston?
Ashton, when we want to do a big project, whatever, where do we go to borrow money? Is this borrowed from a bank or from the government?
Great question. So through your Mayor Kasenberg, there's various sources. We can go to a charter bank. We can go to, I believe, you can go to a credit union as well. But where our core loans are that we actively have is through Infrastructure Ontario. So it's a provincially run program where you can get a rate a little bit better than you would at a chartered bank. We may be looking at a chartered bank for more short-term financing because with the provincial program, you're locked in for 20 years. For a chartered bank, you could probably do a 5-year loan on a 20-year amortization schedule, similar to as we would if you're getting a mortgage. So that we have the opportunity to refinance in 5 years. However, with Infrastructure Ontario loans, once you lock in for 25 years, that obligation is there. You can't pay it off early. You have to pay all the interest. But those are the two main sources, the chartered banks or Infrastructure Ontario.
All right. Anyone else? We're getting a little bit of lesson here. Yep. Okay. Thank you. I have a resolution for our consideration as follows: that the Council of the Municipality of North Perth receives the Debt Management Policy Report for information, and that the Council of the Municipality of North Perth approves the Debt Management Policy 06-2025. Can I call for a move? Moved by Councillor Rothwell, seconded by Councillor Duncan. Any discussion or debate? Seeing none, let's have that vote. And that is carried. Mr. Romani, you earned your pay tonight.
Thank you.
Give that man a bonus. All right. In a report that informs the budget, we're going to turn to item 9.2 and specifically to item 9.2.1. In this item, Council is presented with the results of various public and council inputs into the 2026 budget process through two distinct surveys. I'm going to call on Lindsay Klein, our Manager of Strategic Initiatives, to present Council with the results of those surveys. Ms. Klein, welcome.
Good evening, Mayor Kasenberg and members of council. So to prepare for the 2026 budget process, we invited North Perth residents and business owners to share their priorities through an online budget survey posted on the municipality's online engagement platform, Your Say North Perth. The survey was open from July 2nd to July 31st and was promoted through social media, our website, local newspapers, and radio. Paper copies were also available at the municipal office in all three North Perth Public Library branches. We received 288 responses, which represents about 1.8% of North Perth's total population. While this is a slight decrease from the 341 responses we received last year, the survey continues to be an important tool for capturing community feedback to guide budget decisions. To begin the survey, we asked respondents if they lived and or owned a business in North Perth. 285 stated they were residents of North Perth, 34 were business owners, and 2 identified as neither. Next, we asked, what is your age? And responses came from all 3 age groups, with the highest participation from those aged 35 to 44, but overall responses were well distributed across ages 25 through 65 plus. This helps ensure a balance of perspectives. Next, we asked how familiar respondents were with the municipal budget process. 31 respondents felt very familiar, 145 felt somewhat familiar, and 112 said not familiar at all. This highlights an opportunity and suggests there may be value in more public education or communication about the process. When asked what information matters most when it comes to the budget, the top 3 items were a breakdown of where tax dollars go, what services residents receive for their taxes, and how taxes are calculated. We asked respondents to indicate whether service levels in various areas should be increased, maintained, or decreased. Respondents identified several areas they feel need increased investment, including childcare, community and recreation programs, physician recruitment, traffic and transportation, policing, road and sidewalk maintenance. When asked to narrow down their top 5 priorities from the list of services in the previous question, the most common responses were physician recruitment, childcare and daycare centers, firefighting and prevention, road and sidewalk maintenance, community and recreation programs. When asked to share comments regarding their satisfaction with the delivery of municipal services, respondents provided positive feedback on waste management, parks and trails, library and fire services, as well as community programming. Concerns were identified around increased traffic, enhanced pedestrian safety, policing and bylaw enforcement, road and sidewalk maintenance, availability of childcare spaces, and growth and development pressures. Concerns were identified around increased traffic, enhanced pedestrian safety, policing and bylaw enforcement, road and sidewalk maintenance, availability of childcare spaces, and growth and development pressures. I apologize if I just repeated a section. This mix of positive feedback and areas for improvement highlights where the municipality is doing well and where community expectations are rising. Respondents were asked to identify additional priorities for investment that were not identified in previous questions. Responses included truck bypass and traffic improvements, tree planting, parks and green spaces, early on and recreational programming, downtown revitalization, and rural road maintenance. Respondents were also asked where fewer tax dollars should be spent. Common themes were fleet management and vehicle replacement, administrative costs such as staffing, wages and benefits, and inefficient spending in general. We also asked residents what services they would support increased user fees for to reduce our reliance on property taxes. This question was optional and respondents could select more than one response. Results show varying levels of support across services, which included arenas, community facility rentals, recreation programs, and dog tags, licenses, and permits. Lastly, we asked respondents what they felt was the top challenge facing North Perth that the budget should address. Responses included physician recruitment and healthcare, road maintenance, traffic and truck bypass, infrastructure renewal, childcare, policing, bylaw enforcement and crime prevention, balancing tax increase with services received, and managing growth. In closing, we'd like to thank everyone who took the time to participate in this year's budget survey. The survey results provide valuable insight into community priorities, and this feedback will help inform Council's discussions and decisions throughout the 2026 budget process. Thank you.
Thanks, Ms. Klein, and to your team. I know Mackenzie Smith was quite involved in managing the responses and the whole process, so we thank her too. Colleagues, questions, first comments? This is sort of budget input to us, so you'll note that in the report there was some feedback to councillor-generated comments in a council-oriented survey that occurred as well, with some staff feedback so that we know what the current status actually is and where there might be opportunity for development or further adjustments. So again, comments, questions, thoughts? Staff is of course looking for direction and insight from council. If any of that jumped out at you, we'd like to know what you're thinking about it. Councillor Rothman.
Thanks very much, Mayor Todd. Thanks very much, Lindsay, for the report, and Mackenzie. Every year we talk about this, trying to encourage and support members of the public to come forward and give us their opinion. And you did note the opportunity to have more education, for example, on budget processes and so on. I certainly agree. Anything that staff would suggest that we could possibly do to increase our survey uptake in our community to go higher from just less than 2%, perhaps to something larger. I'm sure you've thought about this, and as all staff, and I think it's a conundrum that we have to try to have our public give us responses in a survey that we can utilize. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rothwell, through the mayor. It's a good question. I will say that even though our response level was a little bit lower this year than previous and than last year specifically, if you look back at maybe 2 or 3 years ago, our response is still much higher. We're always looking at ways to get the word out. We've made better use of social media, specifically like paid advertising on our social media to get the word out. I will say that we were doing a lot of engagement during the same time this year with different surveys, like our transit survey, our organic waste survey. So there might have been a little bit of survey and public engagement fatigue. So maybe just kind of better planning out next year and better spacing out our engagement and just looking at different opportunities like that.
We could be far more assertive and develop a telephone, an outbound phone solution for this, right? But at what cost? And so there's always that trade-off of marketing this well with the tools that are commonly used to market, which I think the staff has done an exceptional job with, and then really stepping it up at substantial increase in price, right? So-called robocalls. Um, Anyone else with comments or questions? Mark, Councilor Wardham.
Thanks, Mayor Caseberg, and thanks, Lindsay, for the report. Just a question on the counselor, uh, yeah, questions and surveys. Will we be discussing those at budget, or is this kind of just as far as that goes? Just curious.
Through the mayor, I think if there's a direct impact from the survey and the council request on the budget, then we would discuss that further during the budget process. But I think if the matter has been addressed through another means or through a previously budgeted item, for example, the public art response, I think then we would just leave it at that.
Okay, Councilor Blazek.
Thank you, through you, Mayor Kasenberg. I have a comment, and I'm a little bit hesitant to make it, but my gut is telling me that I should do it. So, I'm looking at the top issues facing North Perth, that slide, and we've talked quite a few times about policing, crime prevention, by law enforcement. We've already discussed tonight how the OPP budget is a concern for next year, but I want to encourage the public to give some thought to whether an increased OPP presence is actually what we need, or if this is actually a federal and provincial issue with our catch and release system. And I would encourage the public to write your MP and your MPP to discuss those concerns with them. Thanks.
Thank you. It's fair. Anyone else, colleagues, wishing to input on this one? Councilor Rothman.
Thanks, Mayor Todd, and through you, and thanks, Councillor Blazek, for your comment. I think also perhaps an issue that we need to consider as a community is the idea of neighborhood watch. This is a community organization which citizens are involved in terms of being the eyes within the community, and there's a direct liaison between policing and organized neighborhood watch, which may prove to be helpful to try to alleviate some concerns within our community, as we see on the survey, regarding, quote, safety or crime within our community. So perhaps we could investigate that as part of our budget discussions. Thanks.
If I might, I'll sort of put my other hat on for a moment. I am the chair of the Perth County Detachment Board for the OPP, and certainly we've been receiving a number of educational presentations from those around the table and agencies that they invite in to help this detachment board fulfill its mission and purpose. And there is a plan to bring a report from the OPP Detachment Board for Perth County to this council in the very near future. So that opportunity will be presented and give opportunities for our council to ask questions about policing and the environment, the crime environment that we might be facing, the crime prevention environment. I'll also offer that one of those workshops that we had highlighted a lot of the work that is being done by the OPP on crime prevention through environmental design, or SEPTED. And there is a growing use of this sort of discipline and offering of service from the OPP to our community businesses and to homes to learn how they can reduce risk factors in their properties for property-based crime, at least, which is rather exciting. And all of us should consider at least taking advantage of that opportunity. But there will be an opportunity. Myself, as the chair, I may or may not present to this council, but certainly the new inspector for Perth County will be involved in those presentations, and there'll be a little bit more information about policing that we can share. You know, there's a lot of good work being done in policing in Perth County, and to Councillor Blazek's point, it's just not necessarily well known. It's not well sort of marketed, if you will, and so telling more of the story of what's happening in policing and crime prevention, even in bylaw enforcement in some cases, I think is incumbent on us across this council and other agents who are involved in this system to try to pick up the story and tell the story more effectively and convince people that there are things happening in the face of calls that we see from time to time for greater policing. So, just a thought. Anyone else with comments, thoughts? Okay, I have a resolution then for our consideration as follows: that the Council of the Municipality of North Perth receives the results of the 2026 budget survey and staff responses to the council visioning exercise as information. Moved by Councillor Richardson, thank you. Seconded by Councillor Blazek. Any discussion or debate? Seeing none, let's have that vote. And that is carried. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Klein and your team again for that service to us. Let's turn to item 10. Does any member of council wish to ask for a report from staff or from one of our committees? Councillor Richardson.
Thank you. And through you, Mayor Kingsburg, maybe possibly just an update if our county council representatives have. I know last year we had discussed with the winter road conditions that were coming up. Has there been thoughts of possibly a different vehicle of getting that, no pun intended, but of getting that word out other than X and Twitter? Because I do know that a local group had started up at Perth County Road Reporting as a Facebook page of which had a lot of followers. I'm just wondering if the county has thought of a better way to get the word out to the public about actual county roads for winter road conditions.
I can't say I'm privy to any discussions that have focused on that, Councillor Richardson, and it looks like Deputy Mayor, who served as warden, has similar response to me at this point. I haven't heard anything. I do get concerned sometimes that social media groups can post information that is less than perfect or sometimes more graphic in detail than it should be, and so it's a fair point, and I think the three of us can try to raise this point with the county and see if there's an alternate or additional communication strategy that could be used to that end. Colleagues, do you have anything to add? Okay. Councillor Duncan, go ahead.
Yeah, I think in discussions with the public works staff down there, I think there's maybe some things that can be done. The biggest complaints I get is when it comes to closed roads, people don't seem to know if they're closed or open. That seems to be the biggest complaint I hear. So I'm just thinking that maybe there's a situation that we can come up with to help alleviate those concerns so that people have a resource to go to know this road is closed or this road is open.
And of course, there are examples in other counties. Dufferin County, I believe, is a county that has permanent mounted signs on the sides of roads that flash when the road is supposed to be closed due to severe conditions. So, I mean, there are expensive solutions to this, and there are probably some less expensive solutions. And I'm pretty sure that you have the commitment of the three of us to raise this with county staff and perhaps bring it to council to see whether there's more that can be done. Yeah, sure.
And just a thought for going forward, and I know we do it a little bit sometimes because there's so many different places to go for information. You can get it on Facebook, you can get it on X, then you can go to the 511, the municipal 511, and to do that is to possibly have a place on our website, and I know not everything is electronic, that especially, let's hope that last year for road conditions were a total anomaly, but let's hope that it never even gets used, but possibly something that is right on the front page that would show to go to Perth County, to go to municipal 511, to get that, like where it's sort of like you know, municipality of North Perth, and we don't need to get into the details of being a county road or an MTO road. We just need to say you need to get your information here. You can put that little blurb on it, but I think having that right in the front page of the website would be of both websites would be if that's the only place they go, you have to dig and dig and dig and dig and dig to find anything. I don't to do that. So just a thought. Thank you.
Thank you. I think staff is taking note of that. There were an astonishing number, and I'm sure that Councillor Duncan and Councillor Vlasic can concur with us, an astonishing number of snow days last year for school students in our area. And so, yeah, it's maybe that's another indicator. Check out the school bus cancellations. Okay, anyone else? Councillor Nordo.
Thanks, Mayor Kaseberg. I would like to request a report from operations, just on how much it would cost maybe to implement adding some yellow lines on our rural roads. I know it's often a request I get from residents. I know on those foggy days, snowy days, sometimes that yellow line is your saving grace. So I know maybe some of the other Perth County municipalities, they don't do it, but our neighbors to the or Mapleton, they have decided to implement that for a long time. So I'm just kind of curious what numbers it would be to potentially add that to North Perth roads.
Okay.
Thank you.
Let's see where this goes. I see Mr. Ropp is with us. Mr. Ropp, do you want more time for sort of thoughtful consideration on this one, or do you have initial comments?
Just one quick comment through the mayor. No problem getting a cost estimate to do that work. To date, we've used guidance through Ontario traffic manuals to determine when and where the center line is required on low volume roads, which I'm assuming most of the roads you're referring to fall into that category. So that's what we've used as guidance to date, and we have had some roads that have exceeded that threshold, which we have added to center line to. So going above and beyond that, the guidance with the Ontario Traffic Manual, such as what we've seen in some neighboring municipalities outside of Perth County, for sure not any with inside, but for sure we can come back with a cost estimate for that.
Okay. Clerk Carter, should we have a resolution directing staff to that end then? All right, so I think it sounds like this, that the council directs staff to prepare cost estimates for the inclusion of centerline painting on roads that fall below the thresholds in the traffic manuals. And somehow in this resolution, we want to say, but not every road, just like there's almost a need for a definition of like what road, right? So I think that has to be part of the report as well. That you'll report back on what roads might be best suited for that purpose. Kind of your professional judgment, staff's professional judgment. Okay, colleagues, that was my off the top of the head. Todd's had a long day because it was the first day of school kind of thinking, but anyone else want to add anything to that resolution? Sound okay? Clerk Carter, you kind of include the notion that there's a little bit of staff discretion around defining which roads might fit, understanding the intent of Councillor Gordon's proposition. Okay, Councillor Gordon, you comfortable moving that? All right, so moved. Who will serve as our seconder on this one? Councillor Blazek, thank you. Any discussion or debate? Seeing none, let's have a vote if you think you've got it. And that is carried. You know what I'd really love is on 23, them put some flashing center line flashing things so that you can see when you're driving from Atwood to Listowel. It's just brutal sometimes. All right, right, right. It's just brutal sometimes. All right. Anyone else with requests for reports at this point? Let's turn to item 11. No additional items of correspondence for our processing and consideration. Let's have a look at the bylaws that have been recommended to us then for tonight. We have three bylaws for our consideration and an enabling resolution that will pass them essentially all at once unless we decide otherwise. So, colleagues, any of you wishing to extract one of these three or two of these three for individual discussion or action? Okay, everyone's comfortable then. Let's have the enabling resolution as follows, that the following bylaws are hereby passed. 81-2025 being a bylaw to amend bylaw 107-2021. 82-2025 being a bylaw to appoint a building inspector, a zoning administrator, bylaw enforcement officer, property standards officer, public plumbing inspector, and sewage system inspector. And 83-2025 being a bylaw to establish a highway. Moved by Deputy Mayor Kellum, seconded by Councillor Anstead. Colleagues, any questions, discussion, debate on this one? I'm not seeing any, so let's have that vote. And that is carried. And colleagues, it's important to point out the second of those three was rather exciting because we've now scored two new bylaw building inspector people that are pretty hard to find. We had unicorns running through our community apparently, and we trapped two of them. So anyway, I think there's some great news there, and we welcome those members of our staff. All right, let's turn to item 13. Does any councillor wish leave to give notice of motion tonight? Not seeing that, so let's move to item 14. Opportunity for announcements that would be of benefit to our community or that reflect well on North Perth at this time. Anyone in the chamber may raise their hands. I know Councillor Johnston, he kind of arm wrestled us to this one. That's my story anyway. Councillor Johnston, please.
I have kind of a cool announcement. So at the recently completed Canadian National Exhibition, the CNE, every year they have the competition of the ambassadors. And so Listowel Ag Society was represented by their 24-25 ambassador, Alan's niece, Lexi Johnston. And she was the first ever winner from Listowel. So she has had a busy couple of weeks and will have a busy year across the country. And across the province all year till next year. And then she will join it's called the Yellow Roses Club when you are an outgoing ambassador. So it's very proud of Listowel to have our first winner of a provincial competition. 65 ambassadors, I believe, were in that competition.
Colleagues, I think a round of applause is warranted. It was certainly very exciting news for me when I saw it posted. So, congratulations to Lexi and all those who supported her candidacy and her term as the Listowel Fair ambassador. And now she has a bigger, broader canvas to show up North Perth for us. So, we're excited about that. All right. Anyone else with an announcement? All right, that means that we are moving on to item 15. We do have one item to be considered in a closed session meeting of council. I'm going to read the resolution to enable that. If I can find my right place in the book here. All right, the council proceeds in camera at 8:29 p.m. to address a matter pertaining to the following. In accordance with Section 239, subsection 2, subsection C of the Municipal Act, a closed session on a proposed or pending acquisition or disposition of land by the municipality or local board regarding property described as Plan 44M72, Block 73. Can I call for a mover? Moved by Councillor Norton, thank you. Seconded by Councillor Richardson. Any discussion or debate on this? Seeing none, let's have that vote. Okay, and that is carried. We will move expeditiously to closed session here. Those who have not been invited to remain should exit the chamber. We will adjust the audio visual connections Okay. Yeah. So don't get too comfortable, Councillor Rothwell. We've switched the inputs so that we're back into public session. Do you need me to adjourn the closed session? That's okay. I'm good. Okay. I'm told that we have restored our meeting conditions for the audiovisual and IT components, so that we're again back in open session. I am told by the Deputy Mayor that there is no unnecessary response to the community at this point, or report out to the community, that some direction, no doubt, was given, that will remain confidential for the reasons that were stipulated in the resolution to enter the closed session meeting. All right. Again, Councillor Rothwell and I need to go back and compare pictures again. The next item, item 17, is one that we've declared pecuniary interest on, so we'll call the Deputy Mayor back to the chair. We're good to go.
Let's do it. And again, for the record, please note that Mayor Kasenberg and Councillor Rothwell did declare pecuniary interest on this item. So we're on here to the confirmatory bylaw that says that bylaw number 84-2025 being a bylaw to confirm generally previous actions of the Council of the Municipality of North Perth is hereby passed. Moved by Councillor Anstead, second by Councillor Duncan. All those in favor? And that is carried. Oh, jeepers, we still have that. See, the county does it different. I'm in favor. Yes. Yes. And that is carried. Thank you.
So I'm not sure if I'm supposed to ask the clerk to play musical chairs, and we would get up and start milling around. Yeah, some nights, right? All right, thank you. Colleagues, just a quick note as usual now, for our bylaws that touch on provincial priorities that were considered and passed at tonight's meeting, I am in support. There's no veto forthcoming from me, and this is provided to the clerk as part of my required duties as mayor. That means that we have considered everything that was put before us and had a good night about looking at the budget for 2026. It's thus appropriate for us to consider adjournment. I have a motion to that effect as follows. The council meeting adjourns at 8:48 p.m. to meet again for general council business on Monday, September 8th, 2025 at 7 p.m. That's next Monday, folks. Moved by Councillor Rothwell, seconded by Councillor Richardson. Thank you. It's not a debatable motion. The question is my computer alive? I might have to cast a manual vote. But if we have scribe up, then let's have that vote, and I vote in favor. And that is carried. Colleagues, we did the work that was before us. Our next regular council meeting is next Monday at 7 p.m. Until that time, this meeting is adjourned.